go ahead and start sharing my screen. Can you see and hear me okay? Can you see the slides and can you hear me okay?
Yes, so we can hear you now.
All right, great. Well, thanks so much for the really kind and generous introduction. I really appreciate it, and it's great to be here at the first Optimize Summit with the Future Proof Mentorship Initiative. I'm very happy to be contributing and to be working with you all and to meet the students that are on the line today. So for today's webinar, we're going to be focused on discussing effective CV writing with myself, with STEM for Development, of which I'm the president and founder, as was mentioned earlier. So really happy to be here to talk about this topic. I will say before I begin that CVs are primarily for academic sorts of positions or appointments. And so I will be focusing on talking about how STEM for Development recommends that people pursue developing a CV, particularly if they're interested in applying for graduate school. And one of the things I always try to be very clear about is that STEM for Development does not have a monopoly on this issue. There are lots of ways to write a really good CV. And so I'm just going to share with you what we think are some best practices, and then you all can decide for yourself what you think is most useful. So I'll go ahead and just jump in now. And I will say, just to warn you all in advance, there are going to be some questions for the group here, right? So I'm going to be asking people to raise their hands, to volunteer their answers. And I really want to encourage you all to come off mute and share what you think, even if you're not sure, right? I don't know the full composition of this group, but if even a subset of you are scientists, part of being a good scientist is being willing to be wrong. And sometimes being willing to be wrong in front of other people, and sometimes in front of large groups of people. And that humility is just a really important part of science. And so I just want to encourage you all, if you're usually a little bit shy, if you're generally uncomfortable putting your thoughts out there, this is a great space and a non-judgmental space in which to flex that sort of muscle. So I do want to encourage you all to speak up. All right, so let me just go ahead then. So I think you already great introduction already from the initiative. I'll just add for you also a little bit about myself. I'm the founder and president of STEM for Development. My background: I'm a biologist by training. I spent about 10 years working in the laboratory, getting my PhD. I did a postdoc as well. For the last 5 years, I've been sort of splitting my time. I have two full-time jobs. One of them is working as a volunteer for STEM for Development. So basically, I do this stuff because it's really interesting and important to me. And then separately from that, the thing that keeps me employed and keeps a roof over my head is that I work for the US government in a policy advisor role. And so right now, I'm a senior advisor on policy and international programs at the Department of Energy's Office of Science. The Office of Science, for those of you who don't know it, is the largest funder of fundamental research in the physical sciences in the United States. So I work a lot thinking about like international collaboration and research integrity issues in my role. I've worked a lot with a lot of students. I've had over 100 mentees who have been admitted to graduate school since 2020. So if you're interested in graduate school, I think what I have to share with you all might be particularly useful. And so I've seen where people do really well and where they do not so well. And today I'll share thoughts as they relate to CVs. But of course, even if you're not applying to graduate school, I do think there's still some value in what we're going to be sharing and discussing today. Okay, so why are we talking about CVs? Well, right now we are in the very, very early stages of the 2025 to 2026 graduate school application season. I would actually say we're still in the 2024 to 2025 application season. But if you are interested in graduate school, now's a good time to start thinking about these things. And the early months of the year, I think, which we are in now, are a really good time to sort of plant the seeds that will result in your future growth as an applicant. So it's a really good time to think about, what are my priorities? Where do I hope to go next? Am I committed to applying to graduate school? If so, how can I expand my skill set and also start to capture my accomplishments as well in a way that's going to set me up for success when I apply to graduate school? So now is a really important time to be having those conversations with yourself or with peers and mentors. In my experience, and I would say in the experience of STEM for Development, the most successful applicants tend to be those who have a clear sense of their accomplishments and carefully plan and research. And what we have found is that a scattershot approach is rarely successful. The most successful students are the ones who make a plan and commit to it. And before you do the fancy stuff, before you start really planning on where you want to apply and who you want to reach out to, figuring out funding situations, you have to know where you're coming from before you know where you're going. You have to have a good sense of who you are. And you probably have a good sense of who you are, but if you don't have that down on paper, it's going to be really hard to communicate that to other people. So it's important that we start to think about putting our CVs together and making sure that we have one that we update throughout our lifespan. So here's a timeline that I usually share with people for applying to graduate school. You can see on the far left that I generally start the application season in May, right? So we're in February here. And so it's always a good time to talk about CVs, but I do want to point out that you all have a lot of time, if you are interested in graduate school, to be thinking about, this process and how you want to pursue your applications and getting your documents together. A lot of students who are interested in graduate school, the first thing that they do is they want to write a statement of purpose. That's one of the last things that you should be doing, right? Because you want to know where you're applying, what the requirements are, if the programs have funding. Am I able to perhaps contact somebody at that program to learn a little bit more and sort of get my foot in the door a little bit? So, the first thing that I usually tell people, and the thing that I would be focusing on if I was thinking about graduate school, and I was in your position, is I would be using this time to create my CV, to think about what sorts of research questions interest me, right? If you're applying to a graduate program in ecology and evolution, and you go in there and you say, I'm interested in applying to your program. I want to study evolution, and any question about evolution is something I'm going to get really excited about it. That's going to concern people because it shows a couple things. One is it shows that you can't really articulate the research questions in your field. Evolutionary biology, genetics, molecular biology, those are massive, massive fields with thousands and thousands and thousands of researchers and research laboratories. When you're applying to graduate school, you need to come with a set of questions that the field is currently addressing that you find really interesting. And so when I was applying to graduate school, I would come in and I would say, I'm really interested in understanding the role of developmental plasticity and its underlying developmental mechanisms in promoting or inhibiting the speciation process. And I want to use genomics in particular to learn more about that. And that was an active area of investigation at the time. A lot of people were integrating genomics. And, when I was challenged, when people would ask me questions, I was able to talk about my field with some comfort level. And I was able to demonstrate how my field and how my interests relate to the interests of the professors that I wanted to work with in that program. And so, when you're applying to graduate school, what they're looking for is they're looking for potential to be a good applicant. And those sorts of things that show a level of sanity, a level of awareness, of comfort with your field and being prepared is really important. And so that's part of the reason we're going to talk about writing CVs today, just so that you can get a sense of who you are and what accomplishments you have to bring to the table when you apply. So let me see. So today what we're going to talk about is effective CV writing. And I'll start with what is a CV and how is it different from a resume. I'll talk a little bit about the major sections of a CV, how you might split it up into different pieces. Developing your CV, I'll give examples from a fake character. So we're gonna walk through with this character as they write their CV. Their name is SFD, which is SFD, STEM for Development, but that's the name of the character. And we're just going to go with that. It's a little silly, but I think it's I don't know, it's kind of a fun way to go about it. And we're going to talk about some common questions and some misconceptions that people have about writing their CVs. So let's go ahead and jump into that, right? So what is a CV, right? So a curriculum, so actually the proper way to say it in Latin is curriculum vitae, but it tends to be pronounced by most people curriculum vitae, or a CV, is a comprehensive record of one's academic and professional experiences. And it's intended to be used in applications for academic positions or opportunities, or just for sharing, what your background is as an academic, a researcher, as an expert in your field. And the content, as you'll see, is going to range from your educational background to your research and professional experiences, all the way to outreach and academic service. Now, one of the things that I have noticed, and you may be guilty of this as well, which is totally fine, is that a lot of students and even professionals will use CV and resume interchangeably. It's not uncommon that I see graduate school programs that say, send us a resume. And they don't want a resume, they want your CV. So, both of these documents, they convey one's professional and educational experience. But they are also certainly unique documents at the same time. A CV is usually required for graduate school applications, though I'm already getting ahead of myself. Some programs will use the word resume, whereas employment opportunities with a research focus may want one or the other. So usually in employment, we use a resume. For academics and research opportunities and educational opportunities, we use a CV. There are some programs in between, right? You might be applying for a job at a laboratory, and they may want to see a resume, or they might want to see a CV. It really depends on the role that you're applying for. Um, Here's a list, and I won't go through this, to it's quite a table, right? So I'm not going to belabor this, but there are a decent number of differences between a CV and a resume, right? I talked about the audience being a different audience in terms of lengths, in terms of length. What I always tell people is that with a resume, usually the page number is expected to be 1 to 3, even if they don't give you a page number. If they're asking for a resume, they usually want something that is 1 to 3 pages and no more than that. So with a CV, by comparison, that CV is really meant to capture the extent of who you are as an academic, as a thinker, as a scholar. And so, what I come across a lot with students who are applying to graduate school in particular is I find students who send me a CV and it's like 1 page or it's 2 pages. And the problem that I have with that is that the people who you're competing against for graduate school opportunities, unless there is a word restriction placed on you by that university, they're going to give their full CV. And their 5 page CV is going to look a lot better and more developed than your 1 page CV is going to. And so by resorting to a 1 page or 2 page CV, you are putting yourself at a competitive disadvantage. Now, that doesn't mean that you should make your CV 20 pages long so that it looks like you have a long CV and you've done a lot of stuff. If people start reading your CV and they know that you're wasting their time, right, they're going to stop reading your CV. So it's important to be honest and to be professional. Your CV should be as long as it needs to be to capture the breadth of your relevant experience, right? In terms of content, one focuses on academic and scholarly achievements, the other on work experiences. The organization, as we'll see, is slightly different. We usually lead with education, research experience, and publications for a CV, whereas with a resume, we lead with work experience. And in terms of specification, I would say that certainly you can make a CV specified for a particular role. It's a little bit less necessary for a CV. For a resume, you want your resume very tightly tailored to the position that you're applying for. You want to help people to understand really directly how your work makes you a good fit for this particular job function. And that's true to some extent for the CV as well. But there's a little bit more wiggle room in the academic and the idea space. So we still do want to do some specification, but perhaps not as much as we need for a resume. The major sections of a CV, right? So what are the major sections? So, developing a well-formatted CV, like I said, is going to be really critical to your success in applying to graduate school. And what we'll do is we will go through these sections as well as the header and some optional sections together. But here is just a subset of the kinds of sections that you might want in a CV, right? We have educational background and professional appointments, research interest and experience, publications, awards, conferences. Professional employment is all the way over here, right? It's all the way down here. It can be very relevant. It's not the last thing on the list, but it's also not the first. We have teaching, academic service, and then we also have outreach. Okay, so I hope that makes sense to everybody. And of course, this document is meant to capture who you are as an academic, right? And of course, note that these are organized from the most to the least relevant for an academic audience. So here's what we're going to do. So I really enjoy using like ChatGPT and things like that for images. So what we're going to do is now that we know what a CV is, We're going to help SFD, who's a zoology master's degree student from Persia, prepare her CV. So I don't know. I think the cat is cute. I hope you all enjoy it as much as I do. But we're going to help SFD to prepare her CV, right? So let's walk through CV preparation for SFD. All right, so let's start with the header. And of course, as I mentioned before, this is not the only way to do it, but this is a way that we recommend within STEM for Development. You all can decide what you believe, what you agree to, and what you don't. The header should provide professional contact information, including name, affiliation, and if you feel comfortable, phone and email address. You don't have to include this stuff if you don't feel comfortable, but this is the kind of stuff that might go at the top in a header. If you want to include a link like to your LinkedIn profile or a personal website, that's also perfectly acceptable. What I always tell people is that your name should be the biggest item in the document. It should really jump out to the reviewer, to the person who's viewing it. So use your best judgment, right? Like, we want your name to be pretty big. This is a pretty big font size for the name. We don't want it to be like circus big, and by circus big, what I mean is like we don't want it to be like an attraction, right? We don't want it to be a sideshow. We don't want it to be so big that's taking up half the page, right? So just use your best judgment here. And what I always tell people is consider a dark line underneath or separate the section from the rest of the document in some way. Here we have a nice black line at the bottom. Looks pretty good, looks professional. And so you can see how we have this formatted for our character SFD. So let's talk a little bit about the header, right? What should not go in the header unless you're instructed otherwise? Um, so a picture of you, gender, marital status, religion, age. And my first question to all of you is why? Why would we exclude these details? Can anybody in the group share with us? Why would we exclude these sorts of details from the header of our CV?
Okay. So I this is like an academic write-up. So I feel the age is not needed, right?
Mhm.
Nobody wants to know how old you are. And then the
Mhm.
marital status, I don't think is needed, like it's not official. So that's what I think. I may be wrong, actually. And then the religion, I feel we have a lot of issues with religion these days. So
Mhm.
we might want to keep that out of the CV. So that's what I think. Thank you.
Yeah, I would say that people have had issues with religious differences for a few thousand years. So I think that's a good point in particular. I see that also Devrich said to eliminate associated biases that comes with this headers. Sharifa said to avoid preferential treatment. I hadn't thought so much about that. I suppose, I guess if I were advocating for you all, I wouldn't be opposed to you getting preferential treatment. But I would say that more likely than not, especially if you are sending this document out to a bunch of people you don't know, it's unlikely that you're going to get preferential treatment. So, the things that, I think that what was said is exactly right, right? These are all things that can be used to discriminate against you, but they have nothing to do with your capabilities in the laboratory, right? So, for instance, a picture of you. What does what you look like? What does the shape of your eyes or the color of your eyes or your hairstyle? That has nothing to do with anything at all relating to your capabilities in the laboratory or in whatever your academic appointment normally is. Has nothing to what you look like has nothing to do with it. And there are some people who, like, let's all be honest here. There are some people who may be racist. There are people who may only want to hire somebody who they think is particularly good looking. Right? So just no reason. There's no reason for there to be a picture of you. Gender doesn't matter. Does not matter. I have never seen a gender difference. I would not base a hiring decision on that. And you certainly don't want somebody to be made aware of your gender in case they have some preconceived notions. Marital status doesn't matter. Again, it's your business. I've heard some people who have discriminated in the past saying things like, well, but if she's married, she might get pregnant. Well, that's not really any of your business. If they get pregnant, that's a personal life decision. As long as they're doing their job in the laboratory, as long as they are being a good employee, that should be enough. It's no one's business if you're married. Religion, same thing. Age, same thing as well. I don't, with this group, you're more likely to be discriminated against because you're younger rather than older. I would imagine it works both ways. No one needs to know your age, right? Let your CV talk for itself. So just watch out for this stuff. We don't want you all to be discriminated against based on things that you have no control over or that are nobody else's business, right? This is a professional setting. Avoid this stuff. Doesn't matter. And I've seen each of these things. I've seen each of these things result in some bias against individuals over time. So just watch out for that. So we do not want to do what SFD did here. This is not a good idea. Okay. Next one. Let's see. Okay. Yes. So next section. Now this is optional. But optionally, you could consider a short professional summary or objective beneath your header section, right? So this should be brief but specific and set expectations for what will be presented in the CV. What I tend to recommend through SFD, and of course, again, there's other ways to do this, but like a very, very short 4-sentence summary for this section. So what is your professional background? What are your research interests and hard skills? Short-term goal, long-term goal. Those 4 questions give us a really, really high-level overview of who you are and what you're about, and they can help your reader to create certain assumptions or perspectives on who they can expect to see as they read through this CV, and they can test that hypothesis as they're going through. So to give you an example, and again, this is another group question, right? There's going to be a bunch of these, so just get ready to speak. And I will always say I prefer speaking to typing questions in the chat box if you all can be so brave as to do so. All right, so SFD drafted 2 professional summary and objective sections. Which one is stronger and why? So here's A. I hold a first-class BSc in zoology for Crawford. That should say from. That's my mistake. I'm going to fix that. For to from. I've never caught that one before. From Crawford University, and currently work as research assistant in the laboratory of Dr. Dogman. My research interests and experiences are focused on understanding the role of... Oh, folks, let's make sure that we're on mute if we're not speaking. So Anya, could you put yourself on mute? We also don't want to catch your conversation if you're having a private conversation. My research interests and experiences are focused on understanding the role of whole genome duplications in plant speciation, and I have skills in RNA DNA extraction, whole genome sequencing and analysis, and hormone extraction. My short-term goal is to pursue a PhD in plant genomics. My long-term goal is to become a professor of plant biology in my home country of Persia. Okay, here's number 2. There we go. Professional summary. I've always wanted to be a biologist since I was a young girl and have studied biology my whole life. I am hardworking, dedicated, and inquisitive, and I am a good team player who likes to work with others. After I bag my PhD, I want to get a job where I can improve the lives of others and do research. All right, so which one of these do we think is a stronger professional summary and why? Can I get people in the chat or to raise their hands or come off mute to share which one they think is stronger and why? And you got to tell me why as well, right? I don't want to let people sneak out of this, right? So if you feel that one is stronger, why is it stronger? Favor, go ahead.
Okay. I think the A is stronger.
And why is that?
Yeah, I think it's stronger because first off, it included all the prompts that you gave. So there's a short summary of who the student is, who the individual is, and then he also included his skill or her skill, the cat. He included his skill, and then there is the long-term goal and then the short-term goal, and then B is just generic. So his person is just beating around the bush, not really, striking the nail on the head. He's not saying anything. But A, the professional summary on A, it's the person has an identity, a clear sense of identity. So that's what I think. Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Favor. That was really good. And just for everybody's awareness, in STEM for Development lore, SFD is a a female scientist, just so that everybody knows. But good to raise that question of SFD's gender, just so everybody knows. Azubuike, is that how I say it? But I think you also know that I'm calling you.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure. Go ahead. I can hear you.
Yes, the first one, the A, is much, much more better. That is the professional summary because there is few highlights in that A version because you have the research interest is clearly stated and the person has the long is working on. So what it means is that if someone gets across to get this CV, the person will automatically know, okay, this person research interest probably aligns with the research interest of the school that he or she is trying to apply to, or something like that. So the person immediately stated the department, his research experience, and the research interest. So it clearly stands out when compared to other.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank God. I think I caught most of that. Thank God. I think I'm losing you just a little bit, so I might put you back on mute, but I think I got the gist of it. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. So let's talk through this. So a couple things here. One is, yes, like A does match some of the things that I mentioned in the previous slide. Oh no, why won't it go forward? Here we go. So it does certainly match with the structure that I recommended. And thank God, if you could mute yourself, that would be very helpful.
I
Yeah,
have
there you go.
I think there's someone
Yes.
Oh, so let's all mute ourselves. Oh, let's stop coming off mute. We'll have more questions, I promise, for people to contribute to. So don't worry about that. But I appreciate all the willingness to share. I appreciate everybody sharing things in the chat as well. So, it's certainly true that A is a little bit closer to what we have here in terms of the outline, but that's not really so much what I even care about here. So I see a lot of professional summaries and I see a lot of statements of purpose and other documents that read like this. The problem is that, when you're applying for something, you are probably one of 200 people applying for whatever that thing is. And the people who are going to be reviewing your applications are tired, right? There's usually like 3 or 4 of them who have to do 200 applications. And so they don't have a lot of time. And they're probably really tired by the time they look at your document, right? You're unlikely to be application or CV number 1. And so there is a real premium in these documents on making sure that the writing is really tight and informative. And what I always tell people is every sentence. Now we're writing a CV here, not a statement of purpose, so we shouldn't have a lot of sentences. But what I always tell people is every sentence or every line should be absolutely worth its weight in terms of the amount of space it's taking up on that page. It should be critical and essential information with as trim as it possibly can be, right? As succinct and concise. And succinct does not mean undetailed, right? Succinct means lots of detail, but in a small space. And so that's really the premium. When you're doing technical writing, like a CV, for instance, the premium is, can you be succinct? And that means informational, but also in a narrow, number of words. And so, I have always wanted to be a biologist since I was a young girl and have studied biology my whole life. Okay, sure. We probably don't need to know that you've wanted to be a biologist since you were a young girl. That doesn't really, because again, we're making a hiring decision here, right? Even if you're going to graduate school, you're going to cost that university money just to have you on campus. It usually costs a university between $65,000 and $75,000 a year to keep a graduate student in their department, right? And so that's really expensive, right? And so no matter what it is, you're being evaluated for your fit for this particular role. And so telling this person, I've always wanted to be a biologist, that doesn't really help us understand, anything about you and your capacity, your capability, your professional background. I've studied biology my whole life. What does that actually mean, right? I mean, I don't think that you were studying biology when you were a toddler or an infant, right? Like, what am I supposed to do with that information? That's a really, really broad statement. I am hardworking, dedicated, and inquisitive, and a good team player who likes to work with others. So, my feelings about these sorts of things is there's no real way for something like this. What I would focus on, if I have a limited space, is I would focus on the things that are more hard skills rather than workforce skills, because those are actually a lot easier to demonstrate. Everybody who's applying to graduate school is hardworking. I don't know anybody who would not describe themselves as a good team player, right? Like, the alternative to being a good team player is to being a bad team player, right? No one's going to say they're a bad team player in this context. And so, both because it's very broad and sort of squishy, but also because we just can't test it, right? Like, I can look at your CV and say, okay, here's where they did the RNA and DNA extractions, here's where they did the whole genome sequencing. I can't really, I mean, maybe I can find projects where you're working collaboratively, but I can't really make those sorts of evaluations in the CV. The last piece here is, it says, after I bag my PhD, use formal language. I see people write, I'm going to bag my PhD. Just use formal language. After receiving my PhD, I want to get a job where I can help improve the lives of others and do research. That's a bit vague, right? And if these people are going to invest their time and energy and money into you, they want to know that you've at least thought about what you want to do with it. No one's going to come back to you in 5 or 6 years and say, hey, why didn't you do that thing that you said you were going to do in your CV from 5 or 6 years ago? No one's going to do that. But again, when we're considering people, especially for graduate school, we're looking for potential. And somebody who's thinking about their future, about their career, that's somebody who has some potential, right? So let's keep that in mind. After the header and the optional professional summary section, we should detail our educational experiences, right? All the most essential information usually starts at the top. So the things that I would include in the educational experiences, I would always include the degrees that you earned in reverse chronological order from most to least recent. I would detail the years attended, like 2020 whatever to present, 2020 to 2024, whatever. The degree and level, BSc biology, MSc quantum information science, any distinction that you learned, and the name of the institution. And if you completed a thesis, I would definitely add my thesis title, and I might add the name of my advisor as well, although that's less necessary probably. Maybe when you get to higher levels of education, but maybe not so necessary. Sometimes I think it's okay to include your GPA, but only if it's highly meritorious, right? So if you have a 62 out of a 100, or you have, I'm trying to think of my different grading scales here, a 4 out of 5, or if you have a 3 out of 4, those are fine. Those are fine. That's a fine grade point average to have. That's not going to necessarily completely close any doors on you, but it also doesn't really stand out. And when we are putting together your CV, we want to include the stuff that really makes you stand out. And if they want to see your transcripts, if they want to see your GPA, they can ask you for it. But we don't want to put something at the very, very top of the CV that makes you seem like just an okay student, right? And there's lots of reasons why someone's GPA might not be amazingly high, right? There's lots of reasons for that. Growth and maturity, things that happened in one's life that made it difficult for them to study. Maybe you just had a really hard class. Maybe you had to transition majors. There's lots of reasons. I would say if it's highly meritorious, then I would put it there, right? So if you have a really, really high GPA, then I would put it on there. Now, if I was going to put my GPA on there, I'd make sure that it's converted to the correct scale. And so here's the example that I'll give you. On a 100-point scale, I'm going to pick Ghanaian universities, for instance. And I think Nigerian universities are also on the 100-point scale, but maybe they're on the 5. I can't remember. But Ghanaian, I know the Ghanaian scale very well. And the Ghanaian scale is out of 100 points. And on that 100-point system, if you have a 70 or above, that's a first-class degree. That means that you did amazing. I've maybe seen one student on a 100-point scale who's gotten more than an 80 on that scale, right? Now, if I was somebody in the US and I was looking at that 70 out of 100, I would do some math real quick, right? And I would say to myself, oh, that's like if I do, I do the numerator and the denominator, then what that might tell me is that that person has like a 3.3 or a 3.4. Actually, it'd be like a 3.2 or a 3.3 out of 4. And that's okay. It's just not a great GPA. The alternative is they could read that as a percentage and they could say, oh no, this student only achieved 70%. In the US grading scale system, that's like a C minus. That's not a great grade. And so there are going to be people, just keep in mind, if you're applying for something that is outside of your country, keep the grading scale in mind and make sure that that you have followed the proper procedure to do the conversion. Grading scales are not linear with each other. So it's not like you can do, okay, well, I got a 3 out of 4 here. So 3 out of 4 on a 100-point scale, that would be a 75. That's not how it works. It's just not how it works. That would be below a 75 on the 100-point scale. So just make sure that you're doing it correctly. You can include certifications, but only if they're highly meritorious. I don't want to see 20 Coursera certificates alongside your major degree granting institutions because that cheapens it a little bit, right? Those certifications, I think if you want to get them, they're great. Continue to improve yourself, continue to educate yourself, but we do not want to put those and a bunch of those alongside your major academic accomplishments because it undermines them a little bit. It makes them seem less relevant. Sometimes students can include relevant coursework, but usually only if there's a really strong reason. Otherwise, I'll keep it in the transcript or have it as a separate section in the CV. So, if you're a biologist and you're applying for a biophysics degree program, maybe you want to include that you took some physics programs or some physics courses when you were doing your studies. And maybe you want to include that up front. That could be fine. That seems pretty reasonable to me. So just give that some thought. But this is not the place at the very top to front load, all the courses that you've taken. And part of the reason for that is that when you're applying to something like graduate school, we want to hear about the practical stuff that you've done. That's also why on a resume, education section isn't at the top. We want to hear about your practical experiences that you've had because graduate school, whatever job it is, that's a practical experience. You're going in and you're really applying what you've learned. I would not include primary through secondary education. If we don't need to know what your high school was or what your primary school was. Again, I would not include irrelevant coursework like Coursera and other non-degree or certifying organizations for the same reason as before. So if it's a certification in like C++, great. If it's something that's like coursework that's not graded, maybe not so much. Okay, so group questions. So let's look at this together. What did SFD do well, and what did they do not so well with their education section below? What do we like, and what do we not like so much?
Yeah. So the person at the secondary school education and the ordering is not very nice. I hope no. I think the only problem is that the person at the secondary school education.
Yes. So that's one thing. And we'll keep going. And I would ask more people to raise their hands because there's more than just that. But so a couple things. One is the secondary school certificate, as mentioned, we don't need to know that you went to high school. If you're in a master's degree program, high school is way in the rearview mirror. The person who you are by the time you're in a master's degree program is like an alien compared to the person that you were when you were in secondary school. It's a completely different individual by that point. So we can get rid of that piece. The other piece I think may have just been highlighted is the GPA here. Not a good GPA, not something that we want to advertise. This GPA is really, really nice. This GPA maybe not so much. All right, so Miracle, go ahead.
Yeah, sure thing. You have already mentioned about the secondary school certificate, so I think that something else that is worth mentioning is also the courses that he has taken. So I don't think that is very important based on the examples that you gave earlier, and then also of course the GPA. But then the GPA, that whole section could wipe out because it's just about the secondary school certificate. So you could remove the whole section, so the GPA included, the secondary school included, and then just leave out the the certification that he got at the Memorial Hospital, except for the typo, I think that it's valid because it's actual practical work, right? So I think that the BSc at is that in Princeton University works, the certification at the Memorial Hospital works, and then also the MSc degree works. But I don't know if the going into detail, the advisor, the thesis title, and all these other things, I don't know if it's relevant for just the education section. I think it could be included in other sections of the CV, but I don't know if it's going to work in the education section.
Okay. So a couple things here. So I would agree. I think with the Coursera courses taken, I would probably pull those out. And again, like from my perspective, I think a lot of students say to themselves, Coursera courses, that's really important. That's a big deal. Um, I do think that Coursera courses are useful because they teach you something, like they help you to continue to develop your skills, which is important, right? I mean, we should be educating ourselves for the sake of educating ourselves and because we know that that information is going to be important down the road. But it's also, it's at the same time, you've been in multiple degree programs by this point. You've been getting grades, you've been taking classes. So if the Coursera courses help you to learn more, that's great. But they're not graded, you're not being closely evaluated. So we probably don't need to have them here. You can always list them in a section at the end, unlike, large scale courses that have been taken, but probably not here. First aid certification and this was not a typo. These are all just really bad puns. Dr. Dogman is probably the least creative thing in the world. Meow Memorial Hospital, right? So, right, does first aid certification matter here? No, it doesn't. It doesn't matter. It's great that they're first aid certified, but it doesn't matter. I'll come back to the other comments that you made in a moment. I saw somebody else raise their hand who wanted to speak. Did somebody else have some thoughts? Maybe what are some positive things, some things that we like? What are some things we like?
I see that the person's master's degree program in plant biology is in progress. And I like that this person added that his advisor's name and the thesis he worked on, as this would increase his chances. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, there's a couple things here. One is I think it's very nicely organized, right? It's easy to read, it's clean, all the spacing is good. I will tell you this, I think that so one of the conversations that I have with students often is about viewer comfort or reader comfort, whatever you want to call it. And what that basically means is that, when somebody's looking at 200 CVs, we don't want them to open up our CV and have a panic attack because of how poorly formatted the document is, right? We want to make it really easy for somebody to read our document. And part of the reason for that is comfort. It just makes their life easier. It makes it easier for them to find what they're looking for and to make a good evaluation of you. And I will tell you, if you make it hard for them to evaluate you, they're just going to move on with their day. They're going to throw your stuff in the trash. So you want to make it easy for them to find your stuff. The other reason that I think is less appreciated is that, I mentioned before that when we're looking for candidates, we're looking for potential, right? And so that means that there is both, the stuff that you're being evaluated on the basis of, have I had all the experiences? Can I talk about my research experience as well? And do I have clear vision for what's next? But there's also the stuff that is in the subtext. There's also things that we don't talk about. So, imagine that you are the very, very best student in your field, right? You have done tons of research experiences and internships. You've published. You know how to use all the major equipment in your field, right? You are very, very good at what you do. But you send in a CV that is hard to read or where there are mistakes and odd spaces here and there and poor formatting. What does that tell the person who's considering bringing you into their lab, right? It probably tells them that you are a sloppy person, right? And imagine, and Blessing, I'm not sure that you mean to come off mute, so I'm going to try to mute you real quick. But so just watch out for that button. But, imagine that you are going to this person, you're saying, hire me, right? Spend $65,000 to $75,000 a year on my education. And you could not be bothered to proofread your document. What does that say about what you're going to be like when we actually give you admission, right? If you couldn't be bothered to even proofread, what does that tell us you're going to be like when you come here? So, we're looking for potential. So this is very nice. It's good. This is nicely formatted. The species name is italicized. It's easy to read. I think having the thesis title is nice here because a thesis is like, it's your capstone. It's the big project. And it helps us to understand a little bit about the kinds of questions that you ask, which is part of who you are. So that can be really valuable and important. The years, of course, are also in reverse chronological order. I would probably move this one above this one if we were keeping all of them, which we're not, because this, it also started earlier. But in any case, so I think that was good. I think you all got the idea. So thank you for sharing. Okay, so now we'll talk about research interests, right? So besides the basics of your education, this is probably the most important section. And you can start this section if you want by stating your research interests. I mean, what I always tell people is you should avoid simply listing buzzwords or terminology, but you also don't want to write a whole paragraph, right? One sentence specifying the research topics that interest you should be enough. So these are just some examples from me. This is from my old CV. And what you can see is that I didn't write developmental biology. I didn't write evolution. I didn't write ecology. I wrote about specific subtopics, major areas of investigation, and then what sorts of questions within those fields I'm interested in, right? So that's how I would approach this. We want to show, if you are going to have a research interest section, we want it to present in such a way that it shows people that you really understand what the questions in your field are. If you just write PCR, evolution, material science, it's not going to work for you so well. So watch out for that. There we go. And I would say, in general, once we do get to the research experience section, this is a really critical section. And so what I usually tell people is, especially if you are a newer researcher, is, we don't want to go on forever. We don't want to write a whole paragraph about a project, but maybe just give people a little bit of an understanding of what you do. So, things like, who is the advisor? What was your role at the very, very top, right? Lead student investigator, principal investigator, project title, summary, duties. These are all things that are really useful. I'll let you all read them for just a moment. But what's nice about this is that it basically says in a concise way, here's my role, here's who I work under, here's the title of my project, here's one sentence about what is unknown, and here's another sentence about, I need to fix that. Here's another sentence about the approach, and then duties, here's how I actually did that work. Here's how I actually did it, right? That's really important stuff. That's very helpful to somebody who's evaluating you. And again, it keeps it short. Don't write a paragraph. Don't write 5 sentences. But again, each thing builds, and it helps us to tell a clearer and clearer story. All right, next group question. So the publication section is where we put peer-reviewed articles. SFD is trying to decide how to format her publication section. So, right, so you've done some research projects probably. You probably want to highlight if you have any publications. So without me telling you any more, which of these approaches do we want to take to formatting our publication section? Do we want to do it in the way that is done in A or in B? Which one do we want to do? So just give a look to them and think about which one is a stronger way to present our publication. So here I'm not giving you any information before we jump into the question. I want you all to just look at this and tell me, if you were somebody who was evaluating SFD, what would you say? What's better? What's not so good? I see good luck is coming off mute. Okay, maybe not. Sharifa?
Yeah, I think the A is quite better because of the way it is arranged, and we can clearly see the other authors of the project. We can clearly see each one of them compared to the other one, and the capitalization of each word as well. It's well defined in the first one. So yeah, the first one.
Okay, sure, thank you. Any other thoughts? But good points, Sharifa. I see that some people feel that B is better, so I'd be curious about their thoughts on that. But does anybody else have any thoughts that they want to share on which one we prefer and why? Oh, Joshua?
Okay, so I think A is better, is a better format, because in A, the person clearly stated where she came up as the first author or as a senior author. And
Yeah.
then the second part was manuscripts that are in preparation, so that everything is not clustered together and we can identify which one has been published and which has not. So I think the format in A is better.
Yeah. So I'll stop there, but thank you all for all of the hand raises. So I would agree that A is better than B, and for all the reasons that were said, another reason is just consistency, right? And we just talked about sloppiness, about being consistent. Like, look at this one. Here we have publication one, publication two. They're right on top of each other, right? At least here, where they're on top of each other, there's like a space that tells us where one ends and the next one begins. So at least we have some space there, and it's not difficult to tell the difference between them. So we can clearly see this is one publication, this is another. These are right on top of each other. They're all differently formatted, right? Like they all have the name of the journal in italics, right? This style here is a commonly accepted one. We always bold the name of the person whose CV it is. It's just very consistent in terms of how we format the names, right? Here we have SFD and D Dogman. Here we have last name and initial rather than full name. So it's just much more consistent in terms of the preparation and sorting. It's clear that this is published. Here, I have no idea if this one is published because there's no year associated with it. So this one is just much better formatted, much cleaner, much easier to follow. Also looks more sane because there's some consistency there. So very good. Um, Now, in the publication section, as mentioned, what I would do is include published papers alongside those that are in press. In other words, papers that have been accepted for publication and will be published soon. Just make sure that to clearly label which manuscripts fall into each category and organize in reverse chronological order. And I would generally recommend choosing a consistent and widely accepted style for formatting your citations, such as APA, MLA, or Chicago. I think that this is APA style throughout. Some of these are just made up styles. I don't know what they are, but they're certainly not that good. Now, SFD did not do this in these examples, but you should also consider including a DOI, a digital object identifier, which now are attached to all publications, or linked to the published manuscript for easy access. So just think about that. All right, conference presentations. Now, conference presentations are not as highly regarded as publications, but your participation in conferences, particularly as an oral or poster presenter, is considered valued experience for an early career researcher. And you can format it similarly to other sections, give the year, your role, the name and location of the conference, the title. This looks pretty nice. This is well organized and it highlights your role again. We're not bolding everything. We're just bolding your role. That makes it really stand out. So this is nicely done. All right.
Um,
So Blessing, I'm not sure if you're trying to ask a question or not. If you do have a question, could you type it in the chat and then we'll come to it during the Q&A. I want to make sure that we get through all the material. We should be done in about 10 to 15 minutes. All right, so grants and fellowships, right? So after you've highlighted your practical research achievements, it's important to let readers know how others have recognized you, right? And so in these two sections, we want to provide the year, name of the award, and the funding amount if we can. And in addition, if an award was given for a specific reason, we should mention it, right? Like if you know that you applied and received an award that was very, very competitive, you probably want to let people know that, right? So grants and fellowships, and we have awards. Society for the Study of Evolution Fellowship, $1,000. Awarded to 12 students, 5% success rate. By the way, don't make this up. I've seen people who have said, they've had like 10 awards and they say success rate 0.001%. That is obviously not going to be true for all of those awards, right? So just be honest. If you do have that information, great. If you don't, that's fine too. most impressive student, Department of Plant Biology, Crawford University. Provides to the student with the highest GPA in the Department of Plant Biology. This can be really important, these descriptors for awards, because sometimes I'll see an award and the title of it doesn't really mean anything. It'll be like um, the SFD award. And as a reader of a CV, you're like, what is that for? Right? What is the SFD award? It's not clear from the title. So just watch out for that. Then we have things that are sort of in the middle, right? After those main things, the publications, the research. There are still things that we want to address, right? And so here are some things, right? Relevant work experience, I would probably put next, and I would work my way down the list, maybe having scientific societies or community outreach coming last. I think that there's a lot of different ways that you can organize these. I sort of organize them here on the basis of practical experiences at the front and not practical experiences or broader memberships towards the end. And let's make sure that we don't give permission to draw on the slides to folks. So Christian, if you could take that privilege away, we don't want people drawing on the slides as we go. So yes, I would ask people not to draw on the slides. Thank you. You always got to watch out for that. It ends up in people doing things that are not appropriate. So let's just watch out for that. Oh, now it's here permanently. Hold on. Let me stop sharing for just a second. Let me see if I can get rid of it. Okay. There we go. All right. So let's not draw anymore in the future, everybody. Thank you. For each of these middle CV experiences, again, listed in chronological order, do like we did in the other sections, right? Just follow that general trend. Here's work experience. We can do, here's work experience, here's your name, here's your role, here's the place, here's the supervisor, and here were your specific duties, right? Depending on your experiences, for some sections like public outreach, a table may be appropriate, right? Don't go overboard and add like a ton of different graphical elements. Cohesion really is important here. But this can be helpful if we're talking about a bunch of outreach that you did in a community. A table could be appropriate. In terms of relevant skills, so this is optional. I've seen some people, it depends on the context. I've seen times where people put the skills at the very, very top for like a resume. I've seen people put them in the middle for a CV. Seen them put it at the end for a CV. It's really up to you. There's a couple of different options here about where you place it, and we detail that here. But best practices, I would say, are, group your relevant skills into units based on what type of skill they are, right? Laboratory, analysis, writing, language. Keep it organized. We don't want shopping lists. Let me see if I have an example. Here we go. I do. Be specific. Avoid vague or broad classes of soft skills like teamwork or mentorship. And if you're applying for a specific lab position, this is a really great place to incorporate keywords, right? So if you're reading about an opportunity in a particular lab, this is a great place for you to say, okay, well, in this opportunity, they talk about this word and that skill and this other thing. So I'm going to work that into my skill set section. So just keep these things in mind. So let's take a look at SFD's skills. Right? See how they're organized. So a couple things that let me ask you guys, what do you like about this? Why is this helpful in the way that it's presented here? Any thoughts from folks? Any thoughts from anybody? Oh, Anya, what do we like about this?
Okay, I think it's organized, it's well organized, and it's not giving the recruiter time to look at it deeply, and they're all interconnected. Library, the analysis, all interconnected to the library, and writing, the two for his writing, for his research writing. So to me, is organized and rearticulated. It's not giving the recruiter time to look deeper to find out what this person is all about. My point.
Yeah. I mean, so, and I saw that there was another hand raised that got lowered. So I think that everybody's on the same page here. Ishaku, did you want to add something or did you come off mute by accident? Okay, I'll take that as by accident. So yeah, so look, the couple of things here, right? Remember that if somebody is looking at your CV, they want to get in and they want to get out, right? They want to find what they're interested in and then make their decision. For some people, that's going to be publications. For other people, it's going to be research experiences. For some people are going to read your CV all the way through, right? Some people are going to do that. Some people aren't. Regardless, we want to make it really easy for people to find what they're looking for in your document. Because if they have to search, they're probably not going to search. They're probably just going to move on, right? And so what I like about this is that, first of all, we have everything put into categories: laboratory skills, analysis, writing. So if I'm really interested in the laboratory skills, I know exactly where those laboratory skills are. It just jumps out at me. Maybe I don't care so much about analysis. I can just avoid that. I can ignore it. And I can just find the laboratory stuff. The worst way that I've seen these relevant skills sections go, and I would generally ask you all to think about this in your writing for skills section and for other sections, is sometimes I will see a skills section where the person has like 30 different skills that they have, and there's no clear theme or ordering to it. And the problem with that is that when you do things that way, basically what it means is that the person who's looking for like a particular skill is going to have to search for it. They're going to have to read potentially 30 other things that they don't care about to find the one thing that they do. I see that a lot when I look at people's like descriptions of their work experiences. Instead of having like a little header that says, here's the laboratory part of the work that I did, here's the analytical part of the work, they just have like 10 bullet points about what they did in their job. And so the only way that you're going to find what you want to know about is by reading all of them. And most people don't have time to read all of them. So we want to help our audience find the things that they're looking for by adding some structure. And this does a really good job of that. Okay, nice. At the end of the CV, you can provide 2 to 4 references. Alternatively, you can label a section with available upon request if you have not identified your referees or wish to maintain their privacy at the early stages of an application. And usually what we put on here is the name of the person, what their role is, where they serve that role, email, phone, and relationship with them. And we try to be detailed if we can here. Okay. So couple of other things, and I just spoke to this basically, right? Remember that the person evaluating your CV is in a hurry. We want to make it as easy as possible for them to find what they are seeking with minimal distraction and clear, consistent formatting. This is reader comfort. If the reader is not comfortable, they will move on. Do not try to overwhelm your reader. That's another important point. Every once in a while, I will see a CV that is just packed like wall to wall with stuff that the person did, and it's just like thing on top of thing on top of thing. It's almost like just a rectangular block of text. That's not going to impress people. There's a lot of students who think like, wow, if I put all these things that I've done, I'm going to overwhelm them, and they're going to have no recourse but to say, okay, you win, you're a great student. That's not going to happen. If you try to intimidate people with your formatting, if you try to overwhelm them, if you try to make the font size 5 so that you can fit a bunch of stuff in, if you try to make the margins 0.01 on each end of the page, you're just going to make your reader uncomfortable. Be reasonable. Presentation does matter. So I guess what I would say is, are there any other strategies that the group can think of to effectively format a CV? Are there things that we haven't talked about yet that you all would want to highlight that help us to arrange a CV effectively? What are some other formatting tips that people have? Anything else? I see the Future Proof Mentorship Initiative has
Can
their
I talk?
hand raised. But let me start with Good Luck. Good Luck, can you go first?
I would like to say something.
What's that, Good Luck? Can you say
Hello,
that
can
again?
anyone hear me?
I can hear you.
Can I? Okay.
Sure.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I came in late. I came in very late, but I don't know if my question has already been covered. I would love to. I would love to see if there is a provision of, let's say, an already made CV that can be as a guide for someone like me to be able to format my own personal CV, looking at a standard CV that I can use as a template.
Yeah.
I don't know
I'll send
if there is something like that. Do you have anything like that for us?
Yeah, so I'll send that to Future Proof when we close up today. So you'll be able to get a copy of that from them. But sticking to so make sure let's hold that's a great question, but let's hold them until the very end. I just want to focus on this question right now. So any other thoughts on
Okay.
formatting? Um, Miracle, did you want to add something?
Oh yeah, definitely. I believe that for me and for most of the people that are here, it's like we are at the entry level point, and so there's no. I don't think for me especially, I don't have any pre-existing knowledge on how to format a CV in a way that is going to be very effective. So most of the things that I'm seeing now are completely new to me. I'm just learning and taking notes. So for me, I don't have anything to add. I would also take the time to review the notes from this class and then see how I could improve myself. Yeah, so that is just what I wanted to add. Nothing to add. I'm just loving what I'm seeing so far and can't wait to start applying most of
Sure.
them.
Sounds great. So in the interest of time, I'll keep going. So just here's a couple of formatting things that we have not necessarily touched on yet. And again, there are many different ways to format a CV. This is just one suggestion, so keep that in mind. What I like to do, and thank God I see that you have your hand raised. I'm just moving on from the question, but I'm happy to take your thoughts for the next one. So one thing that I always stress to people is order sections by their relevance and list experiences in reverse chronological order, right? We've been talking about that. We want to start with the research stuff, the educational stuff, the practical stuff, and then work our way down to other things like, memberships that are important, things like that, we want to focus on the most relevant stuff. We also want to do it in reverse chronological order because this helps us to find the things that are most likely to be relevant the fastest. Titus, you may want to mute yourself. There we go. No harm. But let's watch out for that, people. All right. So next thing, so this is something that I like to stress to people, align your data elements. Aligning data elements allows for fast reading and processing of information in terms of somebody's brain, right? So for instance, there we go. Okay, now it's working. It was stuck for a second. So let's look at this image on the right here. You'll notice that the section headers are all lined up with each other, right? See this red line here? These section headers are all lined up with each other. And then all the years within sections are lined up with each other. And then all of the descriptors within a section are lined up along the same place and with each other. And that's really important because you can imagine if you're trying to read something quickly, that consistency makes it so easy for you to find what you're looking for. I can very quickly just try it, experiment with it, right? Look at a CV where everything is on the left-hand side and there's a bunch of stuff that is bolded, and then look at a CV that's organized this way. It's very easy for you to go, okay, for you to say to yourself, okay, I want to find the research experience. So I know that I have to just look at the left side of the page and scan my eye down for the word research. So you can go very quickly. 1, 2, 3, 4. Very easy to find. If you have a CV where everything's on top of everything else, the sections aren't separated, everything's on the left-hand side, it's going to be hard to identify those discretely different sections from each other, right? So having this all the way to the left is helpful. Then within a section, it's very easy. Some people are counters, some people are readers, some people are just going to count how many things you did. So by having the year over here, it's both acting like a bullet point, but it's a bullet point with information. And so they can say, okay, I'm interested in things that have happened since 2012, 1, 2, 3. Or I'm interested in all of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. It's really easy to figure out when these experiences took place and to count how many of them there are. And then we can, of course, again, scan our eye down the page to find discretely different experiences if that's what we're interested in. So I find that to be a really helpful way to organize things. I tend to recommend limiting variation in font size and formatting. Your name should be the largest thing on the page. After that, maybe have one size for your headers and one size for the content. We don't want 4 or 5 different font sizes. We don't want different fonts between different sections. and use bolding judiciously, right? The more you use it, the less it means, right? And you all have probably been in this situation where you've been studying for a class. And I was never somebody who highlighted inside of books. Like maybe I'll highlight, printed off pieces of paper. But you may have noticed that like there are times where you end up highlighting 80% of the page, and then you look back at it and you're like, you think to yourself, okay, well, 80% of it is highlighted, so I actually don't know what's the most important thing here, right? Like I've basically highlighted everything except for the periods in this section. That's not really helpful. And so the more that you bold things or italicize things or underline things, the less that means to people, right? So I try to be really judicious with my bolding so that people know, okay, this is really something that I need to pay attention to. And minimizing color variation. If you want to have like black and white plus an accent color, great. If you just want to have black and white, that's fine. This is not art class, right? This is not your opportunity to show people how creative you are. I mean, the kind of work that you do should demonstrate that, but this is not the time for you to show people how artistically creative you are, right? So you can have an accent color if you want, but I would really limit it beyond that. All right, some common questions and misconceptions. Let me ask you, let me put these all to you for like quick responses. Should my CV be 2 pages? Yes or no? You all can type in the chat or just come off mute. Yes or no? Yes, it depends. What else do we have? This is good. Like we have dueling answers. It's good for people to put their ideas out there. So we have a yes, we have an it depends. Anything else? There's more than two of you here. I can see how many participants there are. So anybody else? We have one yes, another depends. All right, a fifth depends. So I guess the depends have it for now. So yeah, it depends would be my answer. It was a trick question. So good. I mean, maybe you just don't trust me, which is probably not a good thing, but good in reading between the lines here. Only if you are instructed to do so by the university to which you are applying. Otherwise, you are putting yourself at a major competitive disadvantage, right? There's a difference between a CV and a resume. CVs should capture the extent of your academic experiences. What if I receive instructions on CV formatting from an institution I'm applying to join? So if you're applying to a research program that you're really interested in, and they give instructions that are in opposition to what I shared with you today, should you do what I have shared with you today, or should you do what the institution asks you to do? So I guess the answer would be what Dr. Schwab said or what the institution says, or you or the institution, whatever you all want to say. But let me hear what you all think about that. Should you listen to me? I understand this is maybe putting you all under a lot of pressure. Yeah, you should always do what the institution says, right? Because the last thing that, again, there's 200 applications for whatever it is that you're applying for. Whatever it is, there's always 200 applications at least. So we do not want you to eliminate yourself by not following instructions. If you don't follow instructions, they are going to be very, very happy to eliminate your application. Always follow instructions that you were given. Can I use the Europass CV format? I see Europass a lot, which is why I bring this up. Can I use the Europass CV format? Let's see what people have to say. Any thoughts? Can I use Europass CV format? Yes or no? Anybody? You all were very talkative before, so I know that people are here. Yes or
Yeah,
no?
doctor, I was asking, I was going to say that many of us may not know what an Europass CV format is. Could you please explain some more?
Exactly. Most of us are just
Mhm.
entering.
Okay, all right. That explains why. I see these all the time, so it didn't even occur to me. So I should have explained what it is. My apologies. Europass is like it's a standard CV format that people use for applying for jobs in the European Union. And it has like I've never used it before, but it has like a ready-made template that you can plug your information into. So I think whoever said if instructed to do so, I think is the right one. Sure. Like I think the Europe, for you, those of you who don't know, like I think that the Europass format is fine, but it's a very specific format used for specific circumstances. So it's probably not a good idea to have it as your general use CV. I'd recommend that you have a general use CV in your back pocket, for just applying to a wide range of opportunities. Um, what if I don't have much research experience or a publication? um, you know, highlight what you do have. If you don't have a publication, that's okay. Just make sure to have your research experience section prominently displayed. If you don't have much research experience, your relevant work experience and other practical experiences should be listed high on your CV, right? So just remember, if you don't have something that we highlighted here, it's not the end of the world. Just be cautious or not cautious, be mindful of how we want to organize things. What if I did research at the same place I worked? So this is sort of complicated, right? Because some people we just talked about a separate section for research experiences and a separate section for like work experiences. And what I usually tell people is that I would list my activities in both sections. So in the research experience section, I would highlight the specific individual projects that I contributed to. In the work experience section, I would detail like my job title and my assigned work function. So, I might have like project one, and I describe project one for the research experience section. And then for the work experience section, I might say SF, senior advisor or senior technician, laboratory of Dr. Dogman, oversaw two major research projects, facilitated student use of the scanning electron microscope. You could highlight, you could write it that way, right? So you write it in terms of like what your job functions were, but in the research experience section, you actually go into some detail on what the research projects were. I don't consider that double dipping. I consider it like fully describing your experiences. So that is where I'm going to stop for today. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask them now. I do have some example CVs that we can go over. I think we'll just do one today. But if anybody has any questions, now is the time to ask them. So does anybody have any questions? I also have, if you're interested in joining SFD, Future Proof and SFD are doing somewhat similar things, but not entirely. There's not 100% overlap there. I would say very partial overlap. But if you are a STEM student interested in this stuff, feel free to join us as well as Future Proof, and their information is in the chat. So please do sign up to follow them. Before I go to questions, I will just note, so we'll go over this example CV before we close out. I will also send around this example CV, which we used for today, which we pulled from for today's presentation. I will also provide a resume temp format that I've used in the past, and you all can decide if you want to use that. I haven't talked about resumes, but you can certainly leverage this one if it's of interest to you. So I will provide those after this meeting. So Future Proof, did you all have anything that you want to say before we go to questions?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being around. So it's been a wonderful time to gather here. So I want to copy the link to SFD LinkedIn handle and the link to SFD Facebook handle. So in case you are a STEM student seeking to have further studies, maybe grad school experience and all, SFD is a place to be. So I recommend that you join as I drop the link shortly. And I don't know. I think that's that for now. I would make further announcements in the course.
Sure.
Thank you. So,
thank you.
Daniel, back to the
do you all have any questions? Any questions before we look at that CV?
Yes, I do.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Daniel. Your session has been incredibly insightful, and personally, I've learned a lot. So I have two questions. First is, I don't know if it has been addressed, but ideally, how many pages should a CV be? So like 3-page, 4-page, or I just want to know the ideal number of pages. Then secondly, when outlining the year, that's the year of experience, probably in the work experience or thereabouts, the year, should it be on the left on the left hand side of the resume of the CV, or the right hand side, or it can be anywhere as long as it is properly on a straight line? Don't know if
Sure.
it's clear.
So yeah, that's clear. So a couple things. So one is in terms of the number of pages, and you may recall, I mean, I guess I hinted at this. I didn't say this directly, but my guidance to you all is if there are not instructions
Mhm.
otherwise, your CV should be as long as it needs to be to
Sorry,
accurately
can you stop
capture.
hearing me?
Sorry, Amika, can you not hear me?
Sorry, I can hear
I
you
can
now,
hear you
sir.
still.
Okay. Yeah, I think Amika, this is also recorded, so if you're having trouble with the audio, you can always go back. But I understand your questions. So what I would say is your CV should be as long as it needs to be to succinctly and accurately capture your experiences. There are professors who have pages who have CVs that are 100 pages long, right? I work in a US funding agency, so I've seen CVs that are very, very long. That's not always going to be appropriate. There may be limitations on CV length, right? Like, for example, there are funding agencies that will say no more than 5 pages. So when there are instructions, you need to conform to the instructions. If there are not instructions, then my guidance to you is make it as long as it needs to be and no longer than that. Because again, if somebody starts reading your CV and you make it too short, they're going to miss out on really important information. So if you go out of your way to minimize it, they're going to miss stuff. But if you go out of your way to make it extra long, just to like try to impress people, right? That's not going to impress people. They're going to start reading your CV and they're going to be like, okay, this is just full of a bunch of filler, right? Like if you make your CV, which you can make your CV double spaced if you want. I don't like double spacing for CVs. But if you're just trying to like make your CV 10 pages to make it 10 pages, people aren't going to appreciate that. Like if the writing is all fluffy stuff and it's clear what you're doing, they're not going to appreciate that. So I would just make it as long as it needs to be. And that way you always have, your own personal version of the CV that has everything. And then if you apply for something else where they ask for a subset or a smaller number of pages, you can work from there. But I would always have like a go-to CV that has all of my experiences succinctly and clearly written. Um, and no more than that is how I would frame it. Um, the other thing in terms of the question about where the years should be. So this is my personal preference. And obviously both work. Like in this resume that I'll send you all. Actually, this is a typo. Let me fix that. There we go. So this is a fake CV for SFD or resume for SFD, where SFD worked at a national laboratory as a materials scientist instead of as a plant biologist. But anyway, um, what I, like right here, we have the date, right? And this one has like the full details on the date, which really probably isn't necessary, but they're here on the right-hand side. And then here in this one, we have them on the left-hand side, right? And so, okay, I mean that let me go down to where they are on the left side. Both look fine the way that they are. I think the reason that I have a slight preference in the CV to having the years on the left-hand side is because they sort of function like a bullet point, but it's a bullet point that gives you information, right? So, with bullet points, they exist graphically to say, here's a new thing, right? Every time you have a new bullet point, it means here's a new thing, here's another thing, here's another thing, right? What I like about this is that these numbers are basically acting like a bullet point. They're saying, here's another thing, but they're also giving you information at the same time. And so they're killing two birds with one stone. I hate that idiom, but they're doing two functions at once, and so it's being very efficient. And so that can be, I think, really helpful. So I like it for that reason. I also think it's really nice because with the years on the left-hand side like this, you very quickly in your head, whether you realize it or not, you start to develop a chronology of who this student is. And I've always said that in applications, empathy is really important. Like if you can, the more that you can envision somebody as they are, living their life and being who they are, um, the more likely it is that they're going to remember you. And so I like the idea of having all these years here because it sort of immediately forces somebody as they're going through those year numbers to start to put together a picture of like a chronology and a time series in their heads. So I find that to be pretty useful. But again, there's no one right way or wrong way to do it. It's, it really depends. Um, okay. Any additional questions? I see there's. Go ahead, Amika.
Oh, okay. So, Dr. Daniel, I think I saw a question in the comment section where the person was saying, what's the best format for store saving your CV for easy accessibility and data? So, could you please chime in on that? Thank you.
So this one says, let me see this. There's been lots of concern about formatting resumes to be ATS compatible. Does it apply to CVs? Let me see that. So is ATS applicant tracking system like used in HR? I will say this, I haven't really seen that. That might be something that's more of like an industry standard. Um, and like you say, for resumes, they need to be ATS compatible. And I've never had an issue where I was told to use a particular format. I would just say watch out if there are formatting requirements and then just be communicative with the institution to make sure that you're being compatible. But like I said, I mean, I think that if you get instructions, follow the instructions. If you don't, then don't. I have not really come across ATS compatibility being an issue for CVs or for academic positions. So my default answer is no. But at the same time, like let's be mindful of following instructions, is what I would say. Okay. Any other questions from this group?
Yes. I have a question. Thank you very much for what you've explained to us so far. So for some people that came late, I'd want you to just highlight a few non-negotiables. So there must be some things that should be included in every CV. It does not matter the school or the requirement. There must be some things that must be critically there, like non-negotiables. If you could highlight more, then that would be also cool. And you talked about empathy. Is there anything that someone could do? Because definitely people who review these CVs has to review a ton of CVs, right? In a day, in a week, or so. And most of these are, let me just put it that they are the same, right? So you could get, let's say, 5, 10, 20, 30, 100 good CVs that meet the standards, right? So it's gonna be really hard for them to pick. So is that something that you could do that you could garner sympathy, or I mean empathy, or maybe sentiments, like favorable sentiments from these people who are reviewing this CV, like something that you could do that would make it that would make them go, oh, this person stands out, even though it's the same, but he did something that is different, right? So I don't know how to put it, but I believe you get my point on it.
Sure. So in terms of non-negotiables, I don't know if there are any non-negotiables. I mean, like I said, I think that they're, like having public. I do. What I would say is non-negotiable are a lot of the formatting tips, like organizing in terms of importance, paying attention to reader comfort, things like that are going to be critically important. Obviously, you should have your education section on there. You want to have things that are most the most practical experiences should probably come higher than things that are not practical or that are just memberships. So those I think are the most non-negotiable. But then other than that, I mean, everybody has a different pathway. And so I don't want to give you all the sense that there's something that you must have to be successful. Um, so I hope that's helpful. I mean, I've definitely said what you should not have in your CV. I've said that much. But otherwise, I'm not sure there's anything other than those sort of best practice formatting tips that I would say are non-negotiable. When it comes to CVs, I actually have found that most CVs look different from each other, and that there's a lot of variability. There's a lot of variation in what we see. And the premium is on clarity and presentation. I don't think that I wouldn't say there's like a magical trick other than some of the formatting things I've suggested that are really important. And I think at the end of the day, the nice thing about academia is that for the most part, it is a meritocracy. And so you're evaluated on the basis of your accomplishments and who you are, more so than other things. And so maybe your CV is the same as somebody else's or very, very close. Certainly, again, we want to make it easy to read because that makes someone's life easier. Um, but otherwise, the content should do the speaking for you. Usually, even if the formatting is the same, usually the content of the CV is so different between one person and another person that that's not something I'm so worried about. What I would be a little bit worried about, and I say this because I'm experiencing this a lot right now in STEM for development, is you know, there are a lot of AI tools out there now, and those AI tools are certainly useful and worth leveraging. I use AI tools all the time to help me with what I'm working on. Like, I'm not going to pretend that I don't. What I do not do is I do not have AI do my work for me. I might go to AI for suggestions or helping me to clarify how to say something a little bit better, but I won't have it do my work for me. And so what I have been noticing though is that there is a certain way that like ChatGPT does things. And there's certain, and I'm not going to tell you what they are because I'm a little bit evil, but there are certain things that ChatGPT does that a human does not do in the way that it formats and writes things. And they are tells that I would say I feel 100% confident when I see them. And I know that that might sound like and like I'm not one of those older people who thinks that he's like the chatbot detective or anything like that. But there are certain things that ChatGPT does that is not how word processing works. And anyway, so I can usually tell when somebody's written something purely in ChatGPT based on the content of what's in there. And so what I've started getting is like I get application letters for roles in SFD and they look 100% the same. Like maybe there's a couple words difference, but everything else about it, the formatting is the same. I look at people's, they write statements of purpose. They're exactly the same. So what I want you to keep in mind is that, there's no magic algorithm out there that's going to tell you when something was created by ChatGPT or something versus another person. But when somebody gets 10 CVs that all look the exact same, and somebody gets, 10 statements of purpose that all have the same type of formatting, that are all written in the same way and organized in the same way, that starts to tell them something, right? And so it becomes very easy to pick out the students who did their own work from those who did not do their own work. And I'm all for, taking advantage of great tools that are out there. What I'm not in favor of is people just not doing work and not learning anything, right? Like, I still write my own emails. I see people now who like have chatbots write their emails for them. These are skills that you want to maintain throughout your life. Having to think about like what should I keep in, what should I take out? These are skill. You're not always going to have a chatbot next to you, and being able to have a discerning eye is a skill set. And it's one that you need to be successful in life. And so I will just say that that's sort of a long aside, but I would say that the only time when I do see completely overlapping CVs is when somebody has used ChatGPT or something like that. And that's usually something that I'm not very happy about because it's not like they wrote on their CV this was created by a chatbot. They're presenting it entirely as their own work when clearly all that they did was go to ChatGPT and say, make me something. So just be aware of that and watch out for that. Authenticity in this age is still important to some extent, I would say. So, okay, Anya, did you have a question?
Yes, I do have a question. I don't know. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just a fresh graduate and I would like to be my CV. Major reason why I'm in this class. My first question goes, we used to hear this that you if you want to submit an academic CV should be different from your career or let's say soft skills CV. Let's say I want to apply for a scholarship, it's academic. Then I also want to apply for a job, let's say for a remote job of a social media manager. is it advisable to go with the same CV, or should I tailor each CV to the job description? That's one. And how should I tailor each to meet with the academics and the side hustle? They use the word side hustle. Then another question I have is based on the education.
So sorry. So Anya, sorry. I want to make sure that I get that. So could you narrow that question for me just a little bit? Because I'm not sure that I fully followed.
Okay, I'm asking, should we have two different sets of CV? One that is particularly for academic applications, scholarship application grant,
Mhm.
and should we also have a different CV that is particularly to job applications like remote job offers like social media in order to boost our skill set.
So for academic stuff,
We're able to get the question now.
yeah. So for academic stuff, I would have a CV. For non-academics or for jobs, I would have a resume. And then it really depends which one you send depends on what sector you're in. So like I work in science policy. I use a resume. I don't use a CV for that. If I was applying to work at a national laboratory, I would probably use a CV. So it depends on the context of where you're applying. I do think it's important to always try to shape your CV in minor ways. But to again, like, look at it, review it for the opportunity that you're applying for. Try to make it fit better in the sense of like, use keywords and buzzwords that they use in their description of the program, things like that, just for consistency. So
Okay,
here's the thing. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Anya.
sorry. Okay, can you throw a little bit light or shed on difference between a properly optimized CV and a resume and a cover letter?
Sorry, say that one more time.
Can you throw a light on difference between a CV, a
Mhm.
resume, and a cover letter?
Sure. So I think we talked a little bit about this, and so you can go back to that slide in the recording. So a CV is, for academic stuff, resume is for job searches, sort of things. I'm going to send you, I didn't have time to talk today about resume writing, but you can see by taking a look at the resume and the CV that I provide you, you can see some of the differences in the formatting and approach and reflect on those. But again, there's differences in like the ordering, there's differences in how you might have things stand out, what the different sections would be and how many. There are page restrictions usually with a resume. But I'll send these to you all so that you can have a closer look. I'm also aware that we're low on time and I'm gonna have to go in just a little bit. So is there another, so Anya, what I would say is if you have more questions, you can always reach out and email STEM for Development with that question. So Favor, did you have a question?
Yes, I have a question.
Sure.
All right. So at some point during the call, I got locked out because of the network. So I don't know if you spoke about STEM for development, what you guys do, and how anyone can be a part of what you guys do.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is going to be the last time you'll be coming. So I really want to know what you guys do there and then how you could be a part of STEM for development. So thank you.
Sure. So we gave you so in the chat is a link to sign up for STEM for Development. We have a website, stemfordevelopment.org. We also have a LinkedIn page. So I would say take a look at that. That should help give you a sense. But really what we try to focus on is, similar to Future Proof in the sense that we're focused on talent development, but we're focused very much on STEM talent development and primarily towards the goal of higher education accessibility, and to a lesser extent, job applications and things like that. We're very focused on workforce skills and, less so on research, but more so on like the workforce skills that students often lack. But I would say take a look and, if you're still not sure, you can always send me a message on LinkedIn. Sometimes it takes me a long time to respond to LinkedIn messages, but I can always send you a one pager that describes the organization a bit better, if you're curious. And the link to our LinkedIn is in the chat. Okay. So thank you for those questions, everybody. So I did get an example CV to discuss. And I think what would probably be most productive is rather than having me tell you all what's good about this CV or what's not so good, would be for you all to have a look at it and give your feedback. Um, so let's go ahead and just have a look. And maybe you all can tell me like what are some good things and what are some not so good things. And that's important, by the way, right? Um, you can't be all sunshine and happiness, right? You can't just give good feedback to people all the time. You do need to be prepared to give, some things that can be improved, but you also don't want to be all darkness either. Being too much on either one side gives you no credibility. So, what are the good things? What are the not so good things? Let's have a look. I'll go through this briefly. And then based on what we've talked about today, I want to know what you all think this does well and what this one does not so well. Okay, so we're just going to go through slowly. I'm just going to tap here. So I'll give you all the opportunity to look through it. I'm going to go a little faster now because I think we're all looking. Okay, so thoughts from you all. What are some good things about how the CV is formatted, and what are some things that need some work? Can you raise your hands? Sharifa, do you want to go and share your thoughts?
Yeah,
What are some good things and some not so good things? So let's give some warm feedback and give some cool feedback.
yeah, of course. Right here, I actually love the way the heading were arranged, the objective, the education. I love the fact that it's in bold formats and I can easily see where the objective is and
Yeah.
education and each other one as well. And I can see right here that regarding to the objective, the person didn't really state the key things in relation to the work as it is. It was just peripheral, stating the religion and all that, which is not necessary. And I can also see right here that there's a lot of mistakes, errors with the words. They were not spelt correctly, and the formatting of this as well. In regards to the education, using the what you said regarding bullet point, using the year as bullet point, which made the view of the CV looks much more presentable. From here with this, it looks more like it looks tacky. It's not properly arranged. And I can also see right going downwards that the arrangement of this is not in order as it should be. The certification, okay, yeah, the certification can actually come before experience, but I feel putting experience before the certification would have appeared a whole lot better. And yeah, that is it.
Okay, yeah, it's really helpful. And so again, why is it that we might be bothered? Like, what is the issue with, the formatting not being consistent, the spacing not being consistent, the typos? Why is that such a big deal, right? Like, let's pretend that this person is just the very, very best in their field. What's the big issue with that? Why is that a problem? What does that tell the person
Yeah,
who's
it could actually be a big turn off for the person reading it that,
Mhm.
oh, this person claims to be this, and yet they didn't pay a lot of attention to all these minor things, which could make the person appear sloppy, like you said, and not
Yeah.
professional. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So they could be communicating things like, we really don't want, imagine this. Imagine that so let's suppose that this person is applying to graduate school. Imagine that you are the world leading physicist studying neutrinos. You've gotten every award in your field. You have all these prestigious positions. you are on the board of all these companies, and you have this student who wants to work in their lab with you. And you, this incredibly important, great leader of scientists, you look at this person's CV, and in the second sentence, there's a spacing error, and the word solve is spelled as Slav, right? What would that tell you as what would that say to that person? It would say to that person, like, and they could still be a very humble person, but they might say, like, okay, look, this person is applying to work with me. I'm the greatest physicist in my field, and they couldn't be bothered to proofread their document. It's just not who you want to be, right? It's just not what you want to, it's just not how you want to present yourself. Um, so what you mentioned the certification, maybe the certification could come later. I would agree. Are there other things that folks wanted to raise that they think that this person can work on? I thought that Sharifa did a good job and had a lot of things here to share. Are there other things, other tips, other things that we should work on? And I do agree, by the way, I wanted to point out in terms of the good things, I do think that like these section headers do really jump out at you. Their name is the largest thing on the page, which is nice. There's maybe a little too much formatting going on here, for me anyway. But you know, any other thoughts though from people on things that we could work on?
Yeah, I have another thing to say.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, talking the way the person presented this CV, I believe if the person has presented each point in the form of subject and not in, I don't know how to put that. Like this, let me make an instance, working as a volunteer, it does not really show a firm statement in regards to that. If the person has written it as worked as a volunteer staff and using that kind of format, I believe it would have maintained, like, showed a firm ground regarding to what the person, the kind of profession the person does. So
Mm-hmm.
it does not really show that. Talking about the experience, working is not in, there's no consistency with that. So
Yeah.
I believe that should be worked on as well. And the skill sets, you mentioned about outlining the various type of skills that we have in regards to the various sections. This can be further split into, let's say, soft skills, working. Okay, I can see right here, good teaching qualities, well grounded in communication skills, develop skill in diction, grammar. it could it could have been done better, like, oh, tech skills, soft skills, writing, just to categorize it, and the person reading it can actually see, oh, this is what I'm actually looking out for.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So there's a lot in there, that, and I'll actually add some stuff to it as well. So yeah, I think with the skills, so two things here. One is this is a really long bulleted list. And so again, if you get to the place where you have like 10 different things listed, the person who's reading your CV is going to have to read every single one to actually find the thing that they're looking for. So having, skill groups can be really helpful here. We'll also notice, and I don't know what this person's background is, but it seems like their background is in agriculture. I'm not sure exactly what they aim to do, but it looks like that it's in agriculture and teaching and things like that. And so, what we would probably want to do here is we would probably want to, I noticed that all the skills are soft skills, or workforce skills. There aren't really any skills that are clearly related to agriculture or to teaching, if that makes sense. These are all like meta skills and things like, but it's not really clear what skill sets this person is trying to apply to the next job that they want to take, right? So that I think needs a little bit of work. With these professional experiences, there's no title in terms of what the person's job title was. There are no dates on any of this. So for all I know, they could have done this work, 20 years ago. I think they probably would have been pretty young then, but I have no clue when they did this work. I have no clue what their job assignment was. I think that one thing that we haven't touched on is that, with any of these experiences, you want people to understand and see that you were really good at what you did. And so we have a lot of stuff here, like teaching practice, assigned to a cooperative teacher, to assistant teaching. You give us some numbers. Show us that you're good at what you do. How many classes did you teach? How many students passed the class when you taught versus opposed to when somebody else taught previously? Like give us hard numbers. Help us to understand. If you supervise people, how many did you supervise? If you had oversight of funds, how much funding did you have oversight? Give us those metrics to help us understand that you're good at what you do. And then again, like, the formatting is really quite variable. Like the formatting here is very different from all the other formats. This format is different from that format, is different from this format. This one is bold and underlined. This one is just bold in terms of the title. This one is not bolded or underlined, whereas these are completely underlined. And remember what we talked about before, if you underline everything, if you bold everything, it doesn't mean all that much. So yeah, so that's good. Does anybody else want to share anything that they like or that they think could be improved? Anybody have anything else? All right. Go ahead. Good luck.
Yeah, I wanted to say something.
Go ahead.
All right. Okay. Although you somehow mentioned that was what I noticed while I was going through the CV. I noticed around the experience, the work experience section, the professional experience section. I noticed that the items there were not dated, like you pointed out. If I was the one to go through the CV, I wouldn't be able to know when the person actually carried out some of the works that the person did when the person did it. Or yeah, so I think that was one of the things I noticed. They were not dated. No one could really know if it's been long or something that they are just doing. Or that was my point.
Yeah, thank you. That's very true. I appreciate you sharing that. So the only other thing that I'll add, and then I'm going to have to stop for the day and head out, is anything about this first sentence and about this section in general. I think that Sharifa mentioned something about the section in general, like how it's written, but any issues with this first sentence? Anything that we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
We didn't get to questions. We didn't get to questions.
So I want to hone in on this sentence right here, this first sentence in the objectives. Is there anything that I shared earlier that might be concerning about this sentence? And Sharifa, I'll come to you if nobody else can really raise their hand. Is there anybody who has not spoken who wants to speak?
I think Sharifa was speaking before that, so sorry.
Joshua, or Kelechi, it's been a while since I've heard from you, so maybe let's have you go.
Okay, so for the first sentence, the first thing there that stood out was a Christian with great passion, which you mentioned earlier could make the person to be discriminated against.
Yeah.
So that's a religious statement right there. And the person reviewing the application or the CV could be a Muslim or some other religion. So that is a problem right there. It's not supposed to be boldly stated there. It's not necessary.
Yeah. And most people are well-meaning. Most people are not going to discriminate against you, but you never know. And so why risk it? And so I would say, if this person, I did notice there's a lot of work in this person's background related to like religious services. And so, if this person was interested in jobs related to, or in graduate school for like theology or something like that, I don't think it would hurt there. Like, that would be sort of expected that they might be Christian, or that their religious background would play some sort of a role. And so I would be slightly less concerned there. But in general, I would say don't do it. It's not that like, I'm not saying that you should be ashamed of your religious background, certainly not. What I'm saying is we just don't want to give people an opportunity to discriminate against you or to read into something about you that they could be completely wrong about, right? We all have our assumptions, some are worse than others. And we just want to, we want to counter that and just stay focused on the professional pieces if we can. The other thing that I would say just generally is this is very squishy stuff, right? It's not really clear like what their educational background is, or where they currently work, or what skills they can bring, or what they want to do. And even when they talk about what they want to do, it's very, very broadly written. So we gotta watch out for that. All right, so that's unfortunately all the time that I have for today. Future Proof, did you want to say anything before we wrap up?
Yeah, so Dr. Daniel, before you go, I'd just like to thank you so very much for coming around, for sharing so much. So I'll let my teammates chime in at this time. Joshua, are you ready?
Yes,
So
I am.
let me just thank Dr. Daniel. Thank you so very much. So after now, I will ensure that I send out for the Center for Development Programs to the people here in attendance. And then I learned about your monthly mentoring program. I really like that people from this platform get to join or get to apply for that one-on-one mentorship with you, because on this call, we have people who are young professionals, early career professionals. We have people who are, who are just recent graduates who really need to be around you. So after now, I will have to ensure that some of them get on the loop. But at the same time, there's a bit of inequity playing out here. Yes, STEM rules out those in the non-STEM field. And some persons on the call are in the non-STEM field, and they really, really, really desire the mentorship that you can provide. So that could be where Future Proof Mentorship Initiative comes in to bridge that gap. Since you are deeply into the STEM field, maybe once in a while we could put together programs for those in the non-STEM field, so you could just interface with them and provide some guidance. And I want to put this out there for anyone who's willing to volunteer with Future Proof Mentorship Initiative. We're open to accepting your applications. You can write us through any of our channels, because we're about, reaching out to our peers, those in secondary school and those out there, just to give them information that could help and, help them in their professional and personal growth. So we don't pay anything. We don't pay people. We don't pay money. Our desire is that we all get better together as young professionals, and also we don't pay, but we want to just give of the little we have to help everybody out there. So with that, I say thank you for coming. Thank you, Dr. Daniel, for staying through with us.